If you start in the book of Genesis and then you follow the message all the way through, the Bible is nothing but a book of hope from the beginning all the way to the end. If you go to page number 1 in the Bible, there you'll find the story of creation and how God created the earth and heaven. And the heaven was kind of on earth because Adam and Eve talked with God all the time. And then they decided they wanted to do what they wanted to do. And so it kind of split things up a little bit, but the message of hope continued on through there. And then in the New Testament, Jesus came in, and the first thing he did was announce the kingdom. And so there is hope there. And then if you go to the last page of the Bible, you'll see there's a new heaven and a new earth. Right. So the Bible is all about the hope, and that's what we're about here tonight. And in the book of Isaiah, I just want to point out something there to you. In chapter 9, one of the things that happened in the Old Testament is the prophets came along, and Isaiah was one of those, and he talked about the hope that was coming. That's a rare moment. And in Isaiah chapter 9, they were talking there about the people who walk in darkness, and they will see a great light. For those who lived in the land of deep darkness, a light will shine. And that light, of course, is Jesus Christ. And so when we're at the Safehouse, we happen to take these guys when they are in that deep darkness. And I don't know if you can get a picture of what it's like, but I think what might help us out a little bit is if we were in a dark room and all of the lights were out and the room was totally dark and you couldn't see anything. That's kind of the way they are when they come to us. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you open the door and the light of Christ just starts flooding into their room. And at the very beginning, it's like, oh my goodness, I can't, they cannot comprehend what's going on. And they want to shrink back into the darkness again and get their bearings. And it takes them a little while. They wonder, like, what are they up to? These guys are smiling all the time. They're trying to, they've got to be after something. Anyways, I don't know what all the struggles they are, but there are many. We know that at the very beginning. But then as they come out and start feeling comfortable in the light, then they get to where they share what's going on and what God is saying to them, and we actually watch them as they walk into the light and they accept Christ. Sorry about that. We'll put it on silent. That'll put an end to it. But they accept Christ into their life, and then God kind of guides them and directs their paths. And so that's what we're about. And we just want the whole world to know about the hope that is found in Christ. So if you're lost in addiction, or if you have family members that are struggling with substance abuse, I'm here to tell you, we know the answer. And it's not Brian's Safehouse, it's really the Lord Jesus Christ. That is the answer. But sometimes it takes structure, and it takes additional, like we have to have a renewal of the mind, and there's some things that go along with it, and that's what we're all about there on the hill. So I'm going to let the guys come on up, and they're going to sing a couple of songs. We got a pretty good guitar player, and actually these guys are pretty good at singing. I mean, they're not your choir or anything like that, but hey, you'll enjoy it, so come on up, guys.
my King would die for me. Amazing love, I know is true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you. Praise you. You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. Jesus, you are my King. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you. Good job. Good job. Amen.
I know they're going to be nervous, so I'll pull this back out. You know, it's so amazing. Our God is so big. He's so big. I get so excited talking about God because He's so big. I mean, He is like working in ways that, you know, He hadn't been caught off guard, right?
Right.
Like this drug epidemic that's going on in West Virginia, that didn't catch Him by surprise.
Right.
Now, it caught me by surprise, and it probably has caught one or two of you by surprise.
Yeah.
But it hadn't caught God by surprise, and He's got the answer. And I'm so excited just watching His work as it unfolds, as He's working with different people. Now, you know, when you're working with men, especially with men like from the Safehouse, they all develop in a different way. Like no two of them are just exactly alike. But now, isn't that kind of the way God works?
Right.
In fact, I just heard a YouTube video yesterday on what is the best diet. Now that would catch your eye, right? Like what is the best diet? I certainly needed to know which one it was, so I thought, well, I'll catch this tune while I'm driving down the road, and they go through all of the diets that are out there, the low carb, the ones that are Mediterranean, and the Weight Watchers, and they actually did a study of like, I don't know, thousands of people, and the conclusion, I couldn't hardly wait till we got to that part, and the conclusion was, it depends on the person what's the best diet. And it's like, well, now isn't that like God? I'm telling you, we're not all the same, and the diets are not going to be the same.
Right.
What worked for me might not work exactly the same way. And you just have to accept that God is way bigger than anything that we can imagine. So, you know, you got to imagine. Now, some of these guys come into the Safehouse and they're mad at God. I mean, they're sticking their middle finger up at Him and cussing Him out and all mad, and God doesn't care. He's bigger than that. You know, He made the earth and He kind of made everything around Him. So He doesn't get real bent out of shape. He's way bigger than anything that we could throw at Him. So we just kind of take guys right where they are. We love addicts. We just love them. They're all mean and bad, and they're thieves and liars and stealers and haters of people and break down homes and all those bad things. But God just loves them just like He loves you. He loves them just like He loves you. And so if you just show them God's love, give them the biggest piece of chicken when they go through the line, give them the best bed when they're sleeping at night, give them preference, Yeah, all that stuff matters because that's what Jesus did, see. When he came down, he didn't go to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and give them preference. He went down to the ones that were at the bottom of the totem pole. And he made a difference in their life. And that's what he's still doing. I believe God put the epidemic of drugs on the earth to show his love. That's why he did it. He came to save and to seek the lost, and that includes those who are struggling with substance abuse. So if you know of anybody that is struggling, I'm just telling you there is a way out. There is hope. And we have people that are finding God and are finding a new way. They become producers in society. And not consumers, but they become producers. Now, every one of the guys that are testifying tonight, I believe most of them is like going to be for the first time. So they're kind of nervous about that. And I did that on purpose. I'm just telling you because of this church. I said, we're going to Mabscott Baptist, and those are the most loving people in the world. And this is the best crowd that you could possibly stand in front of for the first time and give your testimony. So I don't know what you're in for tonight, but it's going to be a treat, and it's going to be about what God is doing in their life. So you will enjoy it for the first time as well. Now, the first one we're going to bring up here to testify, his name is Roy, and he comes from North Carolina. Now, his sister graduated from the Sparrow's Nest last year. And so Roy is here as a direct result of God working in a family which is transferring on down the line. And there's more of them. Their whole family is nothing but addicts and all kinds of problems and dysfunction. And Lord's just plucking them out one at a time, straightening their life up. Roy, come on up and tell us how it is.
My name's Roy Martin. 29 years old. I'm from a small town in Maryland called Hurlock. I moved to North Carolina about 6 years ago. I first off want to thank God for giving me the strength and the courage to be able to share my story. I also would like to thank the church and Brian Safehouse for not only giving me the opportunity to help myself, but also to be able to help others through my life-changing story. I started using drugs at the age of 15. At this time is when I also moved out on my own, and I was expecting my first child. Remember, then I wanted to grow up. I wanted to be older. I was in a hurry to be an adult. So as being an adult, I figured drugs were cool and it was okay to do them. That was far from the truth. Before my son was born, I got into trouble and got in the drug charge, was in and out of drug court, and I couldn't stay clean. About 1 week before my son was born, I was sent into a rehab in Cumberland, Maryland. I was there for about 6 months. When I got out, I stayed clean for a little while, but without God, it didn't last long. The mother of my son and I had decided to go our separate ways. I lost custody of my son. I went to parenting classes. I was still clean at that time, and I did everything I could to get him back. After all that, I still was denied my son through the court. And this hurt me more than anything I'd ever been through. And there was only one way that I knew to deal with that pain, and that was to go back to using drugs. And once I did that, my addiction kind of followed me for years. I moved to North Carolina, and there I met the mother of my 1-year-old son and 2-year-old son, and I have 2 stepchildren. And at this point I realized I didn't want to repeat my past. They needed a father, and that's what I needed to be. A father who could be there for all my kids. I thank God for my younger sister. She reached out to me. It was apparent that God used her to get me the help I needed. My sister is a graduate of the Sparrow's Nest. And before my recovery, I lived in the problem. If things weren't going right or something went wrong, that's all I thought about. I'd dwell on it, talk to friends about it, and think about all the ways it could go worse. It was as if I was addicted to the dark outcomes of my problems.
Right.
And soon I couldn't see and didn't even want a way out. Once I began working with God and my counselors at Brian's Safehouse, I became aware of my negative thinking, and I learned the way out. I can't solve my problems using the same mind that created them. Right. As soon as I stopped thinking about the problem and started thinking about God, the solution began to appear. Today I live in the solution much more than in the problem. Even though I can occasionally still go back to the dark side, Brian's Safehouse and my counselors are always available to help me, and I'm also quick to rely on God, asking many times each day for inspiration and new perspectives. And I thank Brian's Safehouse they focused on who I was as a person and are determined to help me. My life coach fought to find the real me and to bring that person back to the light. He also is the one who showed the light. He also is the one person who showed me who God is.
Amen.
Now God has become the main object of my life.
There you go.
I am working on being a man of God. I'm learning that it's okay to hurt, it's okay to forgive, not only others but myself, and that I can let go of all the shame, pity, and anger I have for myself, because He has already forgiven me for my mistakes. He accepts me for who I am, as Philippians chapter 3, verse 13 and 14 says, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. And with doing all that, He's helping put my family back together. I have a good relationship with all my kids.
Amen.
And He's teaching me how to live right. Without God, none of this would be possible.
There you go.
I would not be here today without the grace and mercy of God. I thank Mr. Brush and Mrs. Brush for giving me and my sister the opportunity an opportunity for a second chance at life. And in this short period of time, I've transformed to be a better man, and my sister has inspired me, and she's also transformed into a great woman.
Amen. Amen.
This is kind of my favorite verse that I've carried with me throughout the program. It's Isaiah chapter 42, verse 2. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. And I hold on to that promise every day.
Right.
That's all. Thank you.
Amen.
Good job, Roy.
Amen.
Not too bad for a first timer there.
Amen.
Yeah, that God is so good. He's so good. If you could just know the family and know what all went on behind, I'm telling you, God is so good. He's so big. He just changes people. He takes people that are totally lost and they don't know anything about God or anything like that, and He just molds them into brand new people, and they are light and they are salt for the earth. It is such a wonderful thing to see that happen. And that's not me, that's not us, that's just God. And that is so neat. It's so cool to watch it happen. So Roy is that guy, and at the Safehouse, his claim to fame is he's a pretty good carpenter, and he has been used so many ways there at the Safehouse. As you know, we always have a project underway, and Roy is in the middle of every one of them, and he's been a real blessing. The next guy that I want to bring up, his name is James Wood, and now you've got to understand the story behind James Wood. This guy, he was an alcoholic. And he was like the world's biggest introvert. Like when James came in, all he does is look at the floor, right? I mean, he is just like quiet, somber-faced, and every word that he spoke was full of sarcasm or negativism. I mean, I'd never heard a positive word out of his mouth for a while. And then all of a sudden, God started working on his heart just a little bit and changing him just a little bit. Now he's got him all softened up. He smiles now, and he says some things that are pretty positive even. Now he's a big brother. He just got a little brother coming into the program, and it is so fun to watch. It is great watching what God is doing in his life. And tonight is his first night, and I said, James, I want you to give your testimony tonight. He goes, me? I said, yeah, I want you to give your testimony. He goes, I've got this, Mr. Brush. So come on up, James, and tell us what God's doing for you.
Amen.
Hello, people. Everything he said is true. Pretty big isolator. I'm not used to getting up in front of people. I really didn't like it. Didn't have much to do with it. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Bradley. I went to Bradley Elementary, Beckley Junior High when it was in Beckley, downtown Beckley. Graduated from Woodrow, 1990. I'll let you do the math on that. I can remember around here, one of my first jobs was making fake mustaches at a little shop down here. I loved it. It was a good job. We made eyebrows and eyelashes, beards and goatees, and then we moved up to toupees and wigs. I got good enough at it to where I had requests for it from other people, and I just went straight and asked my dad. I said, Dad, can we open a place doing this? Well, he agreed that we could do it, but he didn't talk too much more about it, so he went and got a loan, and I didn't know that he had mortgaged the house and got it from a loan shark. Well, I can't really elaborate on the story too much more. I'll just let you know that it turned out to be a pretty hairy situation. I thought about that all the way over there. That's the only thing I did. I've been 30 years an alcoholic, so a clean joke's pretty hard to come by. I was still in high school when I joined the Navy. My mom was a school teacher, my dad was a machinist, everything was normal with my family. I'm an only child, I don't even have a first cousin. So I didn't have a lot of people to relate to when I was growing up. As kids and teenagers, we fooled around a little bit, drank a beer here and there and messed around, but you gotta figure this is in the 80s, so not too much was going on back then. So I joined the Navy actually when I was 17 years old. My parents signed me over, so I went to the military. And being that young, being around a bunch of older guys from across the country led into me to start drinking. Never stopped. It's been going on until I came into the program, and that was August 1st. I tried to maintain, I worked, I was out there, normal person, but I hid it. I wouldn't let anybody know what I was doing or where I was at, and what little bit of family I did have. Wouldn't hang around them. I thought I was hiding it. I'm sure they knew. When I was younger, I did a lot of church. I had friends that I regularly went to church with, and was there many years. And around 13 or 14, they moved out of the area, so I stopped going to church. Maybe 13, 14 years old, and fell out with God. I think that's where I lost my way. There's no other explanation. I never thought personally that I would ever find my way back. I thought I was too lost. I thought there was no hope because I've tried rehabs before.
Right.
They don't work, most of them. Now, A lot of it has to do with how bad you want it and what you're going to do with it, because you can't just stick a person in rehab because you want them there. They got to want to be there, and they got to want it for themselves. And that's where it all starts to come together, because not only did I learn about the problems that I have, I learned about God and Him being there for me. Instead of alcohol, I have God in my life. I don't have to turn anywhere else now. I can take Him with me wherever I go. I don't have to leave Him anywhere. I didn't forget Him anywhere. He's always there. My life's great now. I've been there 7.5 months. It's a year-long program. I'm still learning every day. I just got a little brother. He helps me figure out some more things about myself that I don't know. It's a great place, and as long as you keep God first, everything is going to work out. And there is hope for people with addiction. So if you know somebody, there is help. Have a good day.
Thank you, James. That's so awesome. And his claim to fame is he's probably one of the smartest guys in this building. He doesn't want me to say that about that, but he's an electrician, and he's got many other skills as well. He's actually pretty good in the kitchen, though he doesn't like the kitchen, but he's pretty good in the kitchen as well. And James has already made a name for himself there at the Safehouse. He's involved with electrical work as we're doing our projects. And thank you so much, James. God is working in your life in a big way. Now there's a couple of things here. I told them before we came that I was going to sneak one testimony in, and it was going to be like popcorn. It's going to be a surprise, and they don't know who it is, and they're all kind of sitting on the edge of their seat. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and then I'm going to lead in, then I'm going to invite one of them on up to come to give his testimony. But you got to understand, there's a story here that's worth bearing, or hearing, I mean. There's a gentleman in the Safehouse, and his name is Jim. Jim, go ahead and stand up. You're not going to testify, but yeah, there he is. That's the man. Now, Jim, sit down now, Jim. Jim has given his testimony before, so we're going to let him rest tonight. And the thing of it is, Jim's wife came to the class called Living Free. I wanted to make sure you understand there is every Wednesday night at the Greater Beckley Christian School, there is a class that's made for family members of addiction. You don't have to be the addict. All you got to be is somebody that knows the addict, and you come there and get help. Well, Jim's wife came to Greater Beckley to that program, and she started getting interested. And of course, the more she got used to the class, and the more she kind of told her story, she kind of learned how to corner her husband up and let him know that if he didn't straighten up, that the devil was going to get him and she was going to leave him. So that's kind of what happened. And that's a story into itself, but we'll hold off on that story. But as a result of that, of her putting the gauntlet down, Jim went into detox in Lewisburg, and he went through the detox, and then I went up there and picked him up, and I brought him back to the Safehouse, and now he's doing well, and God is changing that family, restoring things there. But while I was there to pick up Jim in Lewisburg, while I was there was this guy back behind the counter, and he was making a lot of noise, like talking a lot, and he was pacing the floors, and he was going out into like a little green area out there, and he'd come back in, and he just had lots and lots of words. And his name was Joe. And lo and behold, as soon as Jim got to the Safehouse, all of a sudden we received information that Joe wanted to come and be a part of the Safehouse. Now that was a mess. So Joe comes in. This guy was the talkingest guy you ever seen. I mean, he can talk up a blue streak. In fact, he talked so much that they actually dubbed him as the professor. And so he didn't like that label being called the professor. So he kind of was rebellious against all that. But as it turns out, God's actually got a call on his life, as he will tell you a little bit about tonight. God's actually working on his life, and he's turning him around. So Joe, I'm going to let you tell the rest of the story. Come on up.
Oh, wow. Thanks a lot. I'm completely unprepared, completely unscripted, but I'll go to my strengths, talking. I come from a very large family. I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia. My name is Joe. Come from Morgantown, West Virginia. Very large family. Grew up in the church. Grew up on a farm. My life as a child was the farm, school, and church. At a certain point in my life, I think with all of us, we decide that God is either for us or we want to figure out what this thing called life is, so we go our own way and try to search it out for ourselves. I did that. I made a lot of mistakes when I was out there trying to figure it out. One of them obviously was drug addiction, alcoholism, and while going through this search for myself, I started a family, and trying to be a man, starting a family with no true direction. Even though I came up in the church, I still had no true direction because I chose to figure it out for myself without God. Bad move. Amen. Terrible move. But by the grace of God, I'm 48 years old. By the grace of God, He's kept me with a loving family, supportive family, even through the hard times of my addiction, the hard times of my alcoholism, and me messing up with the family that I had created. Estranged children, not knowing their father, not being with them as I should have been, not being that Godhead as He called me to be, because I didn't trust Him. I didn't count on Him to do it. I counted on myself. Right. That's where I made the mistake. I got to a point over 2 years ago where I was deciding that the life that I was living was not my own, but I didn't know what to do with it. I'd already made so many mistakes that I was burying myself deeper and deeper each time I tried to make a positive move, what I thought was a positive move. I would go deeper into the addiction, deeper into the alcoholism, and separated myself further away from those who love me and hurt those who love me. But God is good. He's faithful. Right. Through their love and support, and a wife who loves me like no other, and I totally don't deserve it. She fought for me when I wouldn't fight for myself to get the help that I needed. I thought still that I could do it on my own, and I could not. I just couldn't. There was no true light at the end of my journey. There was no true light. But when it was decided that I did want, when I decided, that is, when I did want to seek recovery, sobriety, and all these things, I tried to get in different programs as of up to last year, trying to get into different programs to help me with this. And I tried rehab before, short-term rehab before. They only worked temporarily. They didn't focus on the things that were actually causing the addiction. They focused on the addiction, and they wanted to medicate. They wanted to medicate an addiction away. I'd been for the longest time running from God, and I knew that I wanted to find a situation where God was going to be the focus of my recovery. I didn't know where I was going to go. I had no idea that I was going to end up in Lewisburg. It was Crosswinds, and I had no idea. I fought to get into that recovery program, still not know. I mean, it was not even a recovery program. It's a detox facility, and they were helpful in finding something for me long term. While I was there, as Mr. Brush said, I met Jim, and he was telling me about his situation here. I had no idea. Still, at the time, we were together for, I don't know, maybe a week, almost a week and a half, and I was like, that sounds good. That's what I want to do. And he was telling me about Brian Safehouse. I said, that sounds good. It's ideal. It's a long-term thing, God-based, and it's far away from home. Had no means, had no way to make that happen. It was completely God. Completely God that made it happen. I left home the middle of August last year. Ended up at Lewisburg. By the end of August, I was at Brian Safehouse. While at Brian Safehouse, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I thought, even with, well, I didn't. With all my worldly knowledge and all the mouth that I have, I thought that I could run this program my way. I thought that with what I had learned along the way, I would couple it with what God had for me at Brian Safehouse and then make a situation. I had to learn complete surrender. There you go. Amen. I had to learn surrender, and I am still learning it to this day, but it is the thing. The surrender of what I thought, the surrender of... Let me back up just a little bit. What Brian Safehouse is doing, I was without the substance for a long time, and I still having these issues of myself, of no hope, of still trying to do it on my own. But this is where I had to learn surrender. I knew that God, I know that God has a purpose for me. He has a purpose for every one of us. I was trying to make His purpose fit mine. There you go. That's backwards. It's upside down. I have surrendered, thankfully and graciously, to God and to this program. I'm still working on that, but I found that is the avenue. That is the way that I've made a change. That I've allowed God to make the change. I've just become a part of it, and I'm so thankful for that. I mean, I'm thankful for to finally fit somewhere, fit into God's plan, and Him not just fitting into my life, but me into His plan. There's so much more than hope. There's doors are opening where I wouldn't see them. My family is now, we are still working on reconciliation, but before I saw no way that it was going to be possibly done. Now I see that it is going to be done. It's going to be hard. It is hard, but it's love there, and God is that hope. But getting me out of the way was the key. My surrender was the key. I had to surrender for victory.
Yeah, that's good.
Mr. Brush, it has been a great mentor. The staff there, I have a life coach. His name is Jeff Miller. He's a younger guy than me, so me and him, of course, bumped heads. I know more than him, so I thought. No, this guy's been at recovery for years, and he's worked he was a graduate of the program. Worked the program, married, his family restored, I should have just taken that as enough to be the example, but I still had my own agenda. I look at his life, and I'm blessed, I'm touched, because example alone, that's a great outline platform. But what he's taught me through my time with him was surrender to my thinking, surrender to me having my own way, and me needing to be right. God's always right. I'm probably right maybe 20% of the time, but I put on a good front, and I'll argue the point till I got you agreeing with me. That's the wrong way to do it. God is right. I'm wrong. But I love him, and he loves me, and he's given me grace.
Amen.
This was unprepared. I hope I'm not going too long. But I think another thing about this community of recovery that we are developing at Bryan Safehouse, it is community. It is everyone involved. It is people who don't know us. It is not just us. It is us providing that light of hope, or that example of hope that can be. I know for a fact that I'm going to struggle from this day forward for the rest of my life with substance. But I know that with God and the support of community, this thing will be overcome. It will be overcome for me, for the next person. So there is hope. There's hope, and that's all. I do have a lot more to say, but I will spare you. God bless. Thank you.
Now, isn't that like God right there? I'm telling you, we have a logo. I don't know if you get a chance to check our logo out, but it's the hand of God like this, Jesus' hand. And inside of that hand is the Bryan Safehouse. It's a little house, and on the front of it says Bryan Safehouse. All right, so when Joe came to the Safehouse, his wife Ricky called me up, and I thought she was like, I mean, she can talk too. And Ricky gets on the phone with me, and she says, "You got Joe at your place?" And I said, "Yeah, we do." She goes, "Boy, your hands are full." But man, she didn't know about God, did she? I mean, God's got it. You know, he don't care how big and mouthy we are. He can take us and just melt us down, and surrender is really what it's all about. Now, Joe is no different than you. Right. You see what I'm saying? We think addiction is this big kind of monster, but all it is people doing what they want to do. Right. We got to stop doing that and let God take over. There you go. And that's what we're all about at the Safehouse. I know it's getting to be 7 o'clock, but you got to hear one more, and this guy's name is Matthew. Matthew has been in the program for a long time. He's actually now in phase 4. And when you're in phase 4, that's when you let go of the Safehouse. That's a pretty big thing. It's kind of like anxiety moment. And you move out to what we call the transition house, and you get one of those real jobs, like you go to work in the morning, and you work and you work and you work, and you get a payday, and you learn how to spend money. And that's kind of boring. You know, if you've been an addict, that's kind of boring. And that's where Matthew is now. And now Matthew's got his brother who is older than he is, and yet he's younger in the program. And they both are from the Beckley area. So it's kind of cool watching Josh and Matthew as they go through the program together. And Matthew came to the program first, and he was struggling. I'm telling you, I've never seen anybody struggle so much as Matthew. Oh my gosh, he just was so unsure of everything, and he just was having such a struggle. And then I found out his brother was in addiction, and it's the older brother. Well, you know how it is with the older brother and the younger brother. The older brother's kind of bossy. So I was thinking, you know, if we got Josh in this program and got God working on his life, that's going to have a trickle-down effect. And Matthew and so we just brought Josh in and said, "Come on in, we want you to find God as well." And you know, it's been the best thing. Those two guys, they've been treatment for each other. They've helped each other. There's been times when they want to fight each other. There's been times when they want to hug each other. And it's been good watching God move in their lives. And now Matthew is at the stage where he has surrendered to God, and he is ready to go back out there to become a producer and unite with his kids. Come tell the story, Matthew. There's nobody better than you to tell that story.
Good evening. Thanks for letting us all be here. I want to thank God. I want to thank Mr. Brush and Brian Safehouse for all they do for us guys. I spent 10 years in addiction before I came to the Safehouse. I'm now in full recovery. I destroyed a lot of relationships in my life because of my addiction. Hurt everyone I cared about. A good friend of mine told me that addiction is like the devil. He only wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And that's exactly what it does. Well, ever since I've been to Safehouse, there's been great changes. And the biggest change has been within me. And that's my relationship with God. I never had a relationship with God before coming to the Safehouse. It's obvious that He's working in my life. I got phase 4. The next day I started looking for a job. It's the same day I got called for an interview. Believe it or not, when I went in for my interview, we had went to the guy's church and I give a testimony at his church. The guy that was giving me the interview. So got the job and I've been working. I go to work tomorrow. I'm still nervous about it, but it's just what God's doing for me. I have a better relationship with my mom, with my brother, my kids, and it's just really good. Life is good now. And going to be the father that my kids deserve now.
There you go.
The son my mom deserves, and it's all because of what God's doing for me. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, there you got Matthew. Now, just to kind of tell you how Matthew is, he wants to settle things this way. All right, so you get a little skirmish going and somebody says, hey, I'm going to whip you. And he says something like, I'll throw you out the window. I mean, that's kind of the way he goes. I said, Matt, can't you think of a way to resolve conflict without thinking first about throwing somebody out the window? He said, Mr. Brush, I've never thought about that. So we have to go through the renewing of the mind. You know, you've got these guys, they're ready to fight at the drop of a hat, and it's like, hey, you don't even have to fight. You can solve things without fighting. But that's a paradigm they're not used to. And so it gets to be kind of interesting at the Safehouse. But don't forget, God's bigger than all that stuff. And He just takes all that and melts it down and then makes people into wonderful things. So I just want to thank this church for your support of the Safehouse. Now, we got a banquet coming up on April the 26th. That's a Thursday night. And it's going to be, once again, at the Tamarack. And what I would like is to find somebody here that's got a little bit of passion for recovery. And if you do, see me at the end of the service, and we'd like to fill up a table from this church. We'd like to, a table is $400. And so what we'd kind of like to see is the church take on a table and then fill it up with passionate people about recovery, because here's our goal this year. Our goal this year is to try to help each local church know how can we get involved in the fight against addiction. And that's going to kind of be the theme. Our theme is Beckley in the eye of the storm. Right. And we're going to be focusing on that at the banquet. And I'd love to see you there and see what God is doing. We're going to have some fine testimonies of people that have been through the recovery process. And then we're going to kind of outlay what God has called us in for the next little bit and how the churches can get involved. We want to thank you once again for all that you do to help us. We appreciate that so much. The Sparrow's Nest is growing. We've got projects. God is just so big. He's like, whoa, way big. I'm telling you, God is so big. And you are a part of His kingdom. Thank you so much, and God bless.